All right, let's get this deep dive started. Today we're talking about something that's super useful no matter what side of an event you're on.
Yeah, we're going to figure out the when of event services. Like, when are people actually looking for DJs, photo booths, you name it?
So whether you're a business owner trying to, get those bookings or just someone planning their own awesome event, this is going to be good stuff.
Absolutely. And we're not just speculating here. You got some hard data to back this up. We're looking at Google search trends.
Oh, wow. So we can see what people are actually typing into that search bar.
Yep. And we're also using real lead data, actual increase from 2021 all the way to 2023, just for event services.
Okay, so this is giving us like a real behind the scenes look at when things are heating up in the event world.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. We know there's a kind of annual cycle to event planning, right? Some months are busier than others.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I'm guessing wedding season is probably pretty hectic for anyone in the event biz.
You think so, right? But it's actually January that takes the cake for the busiest month.
Wait, January? Really? I would thought it'd be like June or July, prime wedding time.
It's all about those New Year's resolutions. People are feeling motivated, they're making plans, and a lot of those plans include big events.
Makes sense. Like, this is the year I finally throw that epic birthday bash, or I'm getting married, gotta book that DJ now.
That's it. And for businesses, this means you got to be ready right out of the gate. Think like targeted ads, early bird offers, that kind of thing.
So it's all about catching that wave early. What about after that initial January rush? Any other times when things get crazy?
Oh yeah, we see another bump in April. Probably a lot of last-minute planners scrambling to get things sorted for spring.
Oh yeah, the spring flings, graduations, all those fun things.
Exactly. And then, of course, we've got October. Everyone's gearing up for the holidays. Think company parties, family gatherings, all that.
So if you're in the event business, January, April, and October, mark those on your calendar. Got to ready roll.
Totally. But just like knowing when to push hard is important. Knowing when things slow down can be just as valuable.
Yeah, for sure. You got to plan for those slower periods too. Like, when are things a little quieter in the event world?
Well, as you might expect, summer's a bit of a lull, especially July through, I'd say, early September. People are out there living it up at events. Not as much planning going on.
Right. Everyone's on vacation or at a wedding. They're not thinking about booking their own DJ just yet.
And that's actually a great time for businesses to focus on behind-the-scenes stuff. Update your website, maybe try out some new equipment.
Oh, yeah. Use that time to get ready for the next rush.
Smart move. And of course, December is another quieter one. Holidays, family time, all that good stuff takes priority.
Definitely not a lot of event planning happening when you're elbow deep in holiday shopping. So we've covered the year. What about the week? Any particular days that are like event planning central?
This one might surprise you, but the busiest day of the week is Monday.
Monday. Really? I would thought people would be dreading the start of the work week, not planning a party.
It seems counterintuitive, but it's like everyone's back in work mode, tackling those to-do lists. And for a lot of people, that includes getting event planning out of the way.
So you're saying Monday is when those inboxes are flooded with inquiries for DJs, photo booths, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. And then we see a kind of gradual decline as the week goes on, Fridays and Saturdays being the slowest.
Well, yeah, people are either already at events or relaxing at home. They're not exactly browsing for photo booths.
But you know what? There's actually a little bump on Sunday. Probably because people have more free time to browse and do some research.
So Monday's the king of the week, but Sunday's got its own little moment in the spotlight. Okay, so we've talked year, we've talked week. What about the actual day? Is there like a magic hour for event planning?
Oh yeah, there are definitely some peak times. It aligns pretty closely with, well, typical work hours. So that 9 to 5 window, people are at their desks, maybe sneaking in some event planning during their lunch break.
No judgment here. I've totally been there. But I've also done my fair share of late night browsing. Anything happening after the workday's done.
You're right on the money. Things pick back up from around 7 p.m. to about 10 p.m. Dinner's done, kids are hopefully asleep, and people are back online, catching up on stuff they didn't have time for earlier.
Okay, so 2 key windows. 9 to 5 for those workday planners and 7 to 10 for the evening crowd. Makes sense to me.
And knowing this can really change the game for any event-based business. Instead of just like randomly putting out content, you can target your marketing to hit those peak times.
So like schedule those social media posts for when people are actually online and ready to engage. Pretty smart.
Exactly. It's all about maximizing your reach by being where your audience is when they're most active. And This kind of thinking can go beyond just like advertising and social media. What about customer service hours, for example?
Oh, yeah. If you know people are browsing for event stuff in the evening, maybe you extend your availability a bit. Catch those leads you might have missed otherwise.
Now let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the day and the week, but let's talk about planning for the whole year. Let's say you're running that photo booth company. You know January is going to be your busiest month, so how can you use that to your advantage?
Well, I imagine having a website that's super easy to use is key. Nobody wants to fight with a clunky website when they're trying to plan a wedding or a big party.
You got it. And think about ramping up your marketing in those few weeks leading up to January. Maybe run some targeted ads, create some buzz on social media, or even offer a special promotion for early birds.
And what about staffing? I'd imagine you'd need to make sure you have enough people to handle that flood of inquiries and bookings coming your way.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is to lose out on potential customers because you're short-staffed. This is where, that forecasting based on those peak periods really comes in handy.
And on the flip side, how can event businesses make the most of those slower periods? Like we talked about, July and August, for example.
It's the perfect time to focus on those behind-the-scenes things we mentioned earlier. Website updates, marketing materials, maybe test out some new equipment. Essentially, use those quieter months to get a leg up on the competition.
It's like using that downtime to sharpen your tools and get ready for the next wave of business.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive, not reactive. And it's also a great time to, analyze the data you gathered during those busy months. What worked? What could you do better next time?
So we've been talking a lot about the event industry, but I have a feeling that these ideas could apply to a bunch of other fields too, right?
You're totally right. These patterns, they're not unique to events. Think about retail. People's shopping habits, they change throughout the year, throughout the week, even throughout the day. Back-to-school shopping goes crazy in late summer. Holiday shopping takes over in November and December. And we tend to see more online shopping happening in the evenings when people are at home.
So it's like those patterns are just like baked into our behavior no matter what we're buying.
And as a business owner, understanding those patterns, no matter what you're selling, can seriously change how you run things. Managing inventory, staffing your store, even planning your marketing campaigns.
Okay, so retail makes sense. What about other industries? Where else do these ideas come into play?
Think about travel. When do people usually book flights and hotels? You'd probably see spikes after the holidays, maybe when people are feeling those January blues, or during those shoulder seasons when prices are a bit lower.
So if you're a travel agency or an airline, knowing those trends can help you get ahead of the game and adjust your pricing or your marketing to match.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive, not reactive.
This is really making me think. We talked about retail, we talked about travel, but what about fields like education or healthcare? Could those insights be useful there too?
That's a really interesting question. Could there be better times for learning, for scheduling appointments, for sharing important health information? There's definitely some potential there.
This is fascinating. It's like we're discovering this whole new way of looking at the world.
And it all comes back to data. By looking at trends and patterns, we can get these incredible insights into how people behave and what motivates them.
This deep dive is really living up to its name. But before we get too carried away, I think we need a minute to let all this sink in.
I agree. We've covered a lot of ground today. We'll be right back with even more insights on how to turn all these trends into actionable strategies.
All right, we're back. And I gotta say, I'm already looking at the whole event planning thing in a totally different way.
Right. It's amazing what you find when you actually start digging into the data, and we've only just scratched the surface here.
So before we went to that little break, we were talking about those daily peak times, right? 9 to 5 when everyone's at work, and then that 7 to 10 p.m. window when things pick up again. I'm curious, how can event businesses, actually use this information?
Well, think of it like this. You wouldn't go fishing in a lake where there aren't any fish, right? Same goes for marketing. You want to cast your line where the fish are biting. And in this case, that's during those peak activity times.
Okay, so instead of just kind of spreading your marketing out randomly throughout the day, you're focusing on those times when people are already online and thinking about events.
Exactly. Let's say you run those online ads for your photo booth company. Instead of letting them run on a basic schedule, you could increase your bids or budget during those 9 to 5 and 7 to 10 windows. That's when people are most likely to see them. And more importantly, click on them.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense. And I bet the same idea works for social media too, right? Like posting when your audience is actually online.
Absolutely. You've got it. If you're going to post something new or launch a promotion, wouldn't it make sense to do it when your target audience is scrolling through their feeds?
Yeah, it's like you're way more likely to get noticed if you post when people are actually paying attention.
Exactly. And this whole idea can go beyond just advertising and social media too. Think about your customer service hours. If you know people are browsing for event services in the evening, maybe you could, like, extend your availability. You might snag some leads you wouldn't have otherwise.
That's a really good point. It's all about like meeting your customers where they are, and that includes being available when they're most likely to reach out.
Okay, so let's think bigger picture for a minute. How can event businesses use this info to, plan for the whole year? Let's stick with that photo booth company as an example. They know January is going to be crazy busy. How can they make the most of that?
Well, having a website that's really user-friendly is huge. Nobody wants to wrestle with a website that's hard to use, especially when they're trying to plan a wedding or a big party.
Yeah, that makes sense. A smooth, easy-to-use website is super important.
For sure. And think about boosting your marketing in the weeks leading up to January. Maybe do some targeted ads, get people talking about you on social media, or even offer a special deal for those early planners.
Oh, and what about staffing? I'd imagine you'd need to make sure you have enough people to handle all those inquiries and bookings coming in. Absolutely. You don't want to be caught off guard and miss out on potential customers because you're short-staffed. That's where forecasting, based on those peak times can really help.
And on the other hand, how can event businesses make the most of those slower times, like July and August?
That's the perfect time to focus on those behind-the-scenes tasks we were talking about.
Yeah.
Spruce up your website, update your marketing materials, try out new equipment. It's like using that downtime to get a leg up on your competition.
Yeah, it's like using those slower months to sharpen your tools and get ready for the next busy season.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive instead of just reacting. And it's a good time to, look back at the data you collected during those busy months. What worked well? What could you improve? Always room for improvement,
So
right?
we've been really focused on events, but I have a feeling these principles apply to other industries too, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. These patterns aren't just for event companies. Think about retail. People's shopping habits, they're all over the place. They change throughout the year, the week, even the day.
I can definitely see that. Like back to school shopping is huge in late summer. Then it's all about holiday shopping in November and December.
Yeah, and more people are doing their shopping online in the evenings when they're at home.
So no matter what people are buying, there are these like underlying patterns to when they're doing it.
Right. And as a business owner, understanding those patterns, whatever you're selling, can really make a difference in how you run your business.
Yeah.
From managing your inventory and staffing your store to, how you run your marketing.
Okay, so retail makes sense. What about other industries? Where else could these ideas be useful?
Think about travel. When are people most likely to book flights and hotels? Probably see spikes after the holidays. Maybe when those January blues hit. Or during those shoulder seasons when the prices are a bit lower.
So if you're a travel agency or an airline, knowing those trends could really help you stay ahead of the game. You could adjust your prices or your marketing to match what people are looking for.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive.
This is really making me think. We've talked about retail, we've talked about travel, but what about like education or healthcare? Could those insights apply there too?
That's a great question. Could there be, optimal times for learning, for booking doctor's appointments, for sharing those important health messages? I think there's a lot of potential there.
This is all so interesting. It's like we're uncovering this whole new way of looking at the world.
It all comes back to data. If we can analyze those trends and patterns, we can learn so much about how people behave, and we can even figure out what motivates them.
This deep dive is really going deep. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need a minute to digest all of this.
I agree. We've covered a lot. Let's take a short break. When we get back, we'll explore how to take all of this knowledge and turn it into something you can actually use.
Welcome back. We've been on this incredible journey, haven't we? Exploring all these hidden patterns in how people search for and book event services.
It's like we've cracked the code. We're figuring out when people are most likely to be interested in what businesses like DJs and photo booth companies are offering.
And the cool thing is that it's not just about events. We've seen how these principles apply to retail, travel, even things like healthcare and education.
It really shows you that data is everywhere. And if you know how to use it, it can help you make better decisions in all areas of your life.
Okay, so we've covered those big picture trends, right? The peak months, the weekly cycles, those prime time slots during the day. But I'm wondering, can we go even deeper? Can we get even more specific with this?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it like this. Knowing that January is a busy month for event businesses is great, but what if you could zoom in even further? What if you could see exactly which types of events are driving those January bookings?
Ah, I get it. So instead of just knowing that January is busy overall, you could see if it's mainly weddings, corporate events, birthday parties, or something else that's really pushing those numbers up.
Exactly. That kind of detailed information can really help you fine-tune your marketing. You could create different ad campaigns for each type of event, highlighting the specific services and packages that are most relevant to them.
That's a great idea. So instead of just saying, hey, we do photo booths, you could say, hey, brides-to-be, check out our awesome wedding packages, or planning a company holiday party. We've got you covered.
Exactly. You're speaking directly to their needs, which makes them way more likely to book with you.
This is making me think about those pricing strategies we talked about earlier. If you know wedding bookings go through the roof in January, maybe you could adjust your prices a bit to reflect that higher demand.
You're getting it. It's all about using the data to your advantage. If there's a surge in demand for a certain service at a particular time, you might want to charge a bit more. Or, on the flip side, if things are slow, you could offer a discount to encourage people to book.
So it's like a dynamic pricing model that changes based on what's happening in real time. And I'm guessing this approach could apply to all sorts of industries, not just events.
Totally. Think about a store that sells clothes. They could analyze which items are selling like hotcakes during back-to-school season. Or a travel agency could figure out the most popular destinations during those shoulder seasons when it's not quite peak travel time. It's all about using data to spot those mini trends within the bigger picture.
This is giving me so many ideas. It's amazing what you can learn if you just pay attention to the data and really think about what it means.
And there's another layer to consider. Those things that happen in the world that can affect these patterns. We've been talking about those natural trends and how people behave, but the economy, social trends, even the weather can have a big impact too.
That's so true. Those are things we can't really control, but we can try to anticipate them and change our approach if we need to.
Let's say the economy takes a dip. People might not be as willing to spend money on things they don't absolutely need, like event services or fancy vacations. So as a business owner, you might need to rethink your prices, your marketing message, or even the types of services you offer.
Or, on the other hand, if the economy is doing great, people might be more likely to splash out on those big celebrations or those once-in-a-lifetime trips.
Exactly. And what about social trends? A few years ago, photo booths were all the rage. But what if some new trend comes along? Like, imagine if interactive virtual reality experiences became the next big thing.
Event companies would need to stay ahead of the game and change what they offer to keep up with what people want.
Right. And even something as basic as the weather can make a difference. If you get a bunch of rainy weekends in a row, you might see more bookings for indoor
It's
events.
like all these different pieces are connected, and if you understand how they work together, you can really have an advantage.
And that's what makes this so exciting. It's all about constantly learning, analyzing, and adapting. The more we understand about how the world works, the better we'll be at making good decisions and reaching our goals.
This deep dive has been incredible. It's totally changed how I think about how data can be used, not just to understand things, but to actually predict them and maybe even influence them.
And I hope it's given our listeners some ideas to think about. No matter what field you're in, there are those hidden patterns out there just waiting to be discovered.
So as we wrap things up, we want to encourage you to think about those trends you see in your own industry, in your own life. What can you learn from them? How can you use that knowledge to make smarter choices and achieve even more?
The more we understand about how the world works, the better we can navigate it, and the better we'll be at creating the future we want.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration.